Greetings everyone and welcome back to session 2 of the Promoting Geodiversity Workshop, live from the Oxford University Museum of Natural History. And there were a few questions in the last session. Just to tell you, this is not a Zoom background. This is real. This is a lovely piece of Cornish granite that makes up one of the many, many columns of different geodiversity around this wonderful building. My name's Jack Matthews and I'm an honorary associate here at the museum, and I'll be your chair for the day. Just a few quick, because as you all have noticed, we are slightly behind schedule, but there's so many wonderful things to be said about geodiversity. We don't want to rush them too much. Just to say, if you do unfortunately have any connection issues today, please use the reconnect button at the top of the screen. And we have 5 more wonderful speakers joining us today. And so if you have any questions for them, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of session 2. Pop those in the chat. Click the little button on the right-hand side. That will go red. I'll know it's a question, and I will put as many of those questions to our speakers at the end. But before we get going, I'm going to play 2 very important and quick videos, because all of this is based around the concept of how to use an International Geodiversity Day. And earlier today, we're very pleased to say that the Programmes and External Relations Commission of the UNESCO Executive Board approved International Geodiversity Day with 70 supporting member states. Now, there's a few more minor hurdles to go: the approval next week of the plenary session of the executive board and then the general conference. But it's safe to say that the most difficult hurdles for getting this approved have already been crossed. I want to start by playing a special video that was put together with the support of the University of Plymouth, the University of Nottingham, and very kindly narrated by someone you might already have heard of, Professor Ian, who is, I think, maybe even joining us in the audience. See what you think of this wonderful video.
Men will be taught that beneath and behind all the outward beauty of our lowlands, our uplands and our highlands, there lies an inner history which, when revealed, will give beauty a fuller significance and an added charm. Archibald Geekie, Landscape and Literature, 1905. Our planet is such a special place, enlivened by an incredible ecological richness of fauna and flora. But the accelerating loss of natural habitat and species mean that biodiversity is on everyone's lips. And yet, underpinning biodiversity is its hidden silent partner: geodiversity. The basis of every ecosystem are the non-living elements of nature: rocks, minerals and soils, and landforms and topography, mountains, gorges, rivers and lakes. This geodiversity has its own intrinsic value, worthy of protection. And it has an essential role for the human planet. It provides the building stones for our towns and cities. And it provides the material for our energy resources, including renewable energy. So as well as underpinning biodiversity, geodiversity underpins human diversity. It's the bedrock of our national and cultural identity, the foundations of Mother Earth, our common home.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation. And we're going to watch one more video before we go, because I'm really pleased to say that Christoph Vandenberger, who is head of the Geology, Earth Sciences, Geohazard section at UNESCO, who has been a real strong supporter, him and his team, of getting International Diversity Day on the agenda, has recorded a very special little video to welcome you all and tell you a bit more about what's been going on and how UNESCO are going to continue to be involved in this project.
Good morning and good afternoon wherever you are on the planet. Thank you very much for attending this International Geodiversity Day Forum. A very warm welcome on behalf of UNESCO. My name is Christoph Vandenberger. I'm the chief of the section dealing with earth sciences and geohazard risk reduction. And on behalf of UNESCO, I can say that we are very happy with this initiative. I think it's an excellent proposal that was submitted by a large number of scientific institutions, national institutions, regional, international institutions, and it received an overwhelming support, I must say, from our member states so far. So it shows that this proposal is not only very timely but also very relevant. For UNESCO, I think this is something that we can absolutely support, and we will absolutely support with all the means at our disposal. I think UNESCO has been working for a long time on this topic already, and throughout actually our different mandates and our different sectors, but in particular under the International Geoscience and Geoparks program, which has now actually been assisting member states for almost half a century. So it's been a long time that we have been working on all these topics, and when we realize, and I think an International Geodiversity Day would be an excellent opportunity to show this year after year, how much geodiversity is touching on all aspects of our lives, be it the way we use our planet, the mineral resources we extract from it, the energy that it provides, but also just the simple beauty it provides by the identity, by the identification we feel with our landscapes and how we handle our planet. I think it's an excellent reminder that we can use not only here at the sciences sector but also with our colleagues at the education sector, with the large school networks we have, we are in contact with. And then in particular as well with all the sites that we have, not only the natural and the cultural World Heritage sites and the biosphere reserves, but I think the UNESCO Global Geoparks are par excellence sites where we can celebrate such an International Geodiversity Day and demonstrate the interlinkages with biodiversity, because of course there's a very close interconnection between both. So from our side, this is something that we absolutely welcome, and we will gladly support it year after year on the 6th of October. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very successful day. Bye.
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup, Christophe, and all your colleagues in UNESCO in Paris. Without further ado, we are going to jump straight in with our first talk of session 2. We are going over to the University of Turin to join Marco Giardino. Marco, how are you today?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we're going to hear a talk from you and Professor Zwoliński about the variability and values of landforms in promoting geodiversity. Take it away.
Thank you, Jack. So we are talking about the variability of values and landform in promoting geodiversity. And with ZB, as a researcher in geomorphology, we aim at understanding the role of landform in geodiversity. Question about the role of geodiversity with respect to landform were posed worldwide by several authors. And the first question was, what is the first features you see in the landscape? What is the most important feature in the landscape? So answers show that landform lead the order of perception in the different elements of any landscape, over plants, water, geology, climate, and soil. So, as a matter of fact, the first question we ask in the field is about size and shape of a landscape. Only then do we ask what is made of. And so if we look, for example, at the geomorphometric explanation for this fact, by comparing the map of landform energy in Poland, we can understand the distribution of this landform is very, with their energies, is consistent with the map of landform geodiversity. So this is not only a Polish affair. The variability of landform is dominating geodiversity worldwide. And we can look in the next slide at contrasting landform at the Earth's surface, from the height of Nepal to the depth of Grand Canyon to the flat area of Australia. So we can point out distinctive geometries of the landform, and such as those cone shape of volcanic origin or gravitational origin or alluvial origin or other aeolian origin. So we are attracted by this landform, and we can understand that even tower shapes is distinctive features, and they point out, for example, to karst origin. And this is another importance of landforms, from down to up, from vertical shaft of karst origin to the sugar loaf of Brazil. We perceive distinctive landform telling about the evolution of the Earth's surface. And for our volcanic origin in landform around the world, soaring and flat area like the sheet volcanoes or the cinder cone volcanoes, they tell us about different possible processes in volcanic of volcanic origin. Basically, we know that even if we look at the very delicate or hard curved landform, they tell us about different erosional processes. We can learn from geodiversity and learn also the contrast in erosional processes due to different characteristics of rocks. And this is important because even in rock edges, if they are smooth or rugged, they tell about a longer-term history of geomorphological evolution in this land. So basically, we can look at the diversity of landform and understand also the relationship with the environmental processes, like those by thermokarst, giving origin to hollows and basins around the world. We are certainly, we can look at the braided river and the meandering river like important landform diversities, telling about the morphodynamic processes and also the evolutionary processes, stages in the evolution of the landscape. Basically, symmetry and asymmetry are very important. We can read at the landform diversity and understand and appreciate the importance of this. The value of geodiversity starts from landforms. And from this point of view, we can learn by interpreting them. The variability telling about processes like deposition and transfers of material, like this river delta in Russia. And we can understand morphodynamic in that area. For example, the great value of landform geodiversity could be related to the possibility of interpreting construction or destruction in the landscape by means of atoll growing for biodiversity reasons or impact crater. And also in the great value of geodiversity is related to understand the dynamic related to climate change. Glaciation processes, deglaciation processes are shown by landform geodiversity. And by looking at them, there will be more awareness of the climate change in our land. So we are engaged for enhanced geodiversity perception. So we can say that our researchers were players, and we look at witnesses like nature, landform, like erratics, telling about the response of landform to climate change. And we can spread awareness and adaptation to climate and environmental changing by promoting the knowledge on landform geodiversity. Basically, our understanding of the relationship between man And geodiversity is important because it tells also about the relationship between biodiversity and geodiversity, which are united in this whole holistic view of natural, which is also a system of services offered to humans. So we can say that by mapping geodiversity, we can enhance our resources. We can look at the diversity of our landscape, like in my region, in the Piedmont region, close to the Alps, and understand that the reason why there is a vineyard close to the Alps is related to the fact that people know the actual diversity of this land, and we can think about promoting and balancing the exploitation and geoconservation in that area, like in the granite quarry Montorfano in the Alpine region, that eventually can be seen as a culture of stone. And on the other side, in the same area, in the Sesia Valgrande Geopark, the landscape can be seen as a heritage because it's attractive for tourists visiting this Alpine area. So the dynamic geodiversity is offering us a lot of information also about natural hazard and risk. So if we will be able to understand the values of this diversity, we will be able also to manage properly hazard and risk and to perform better land planning. So I can finish my presentation saying that the variability and values of landforms is confirmed in its importance in promoting geodiversity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Marco, reminding us that geodiversity is a broad and diverse set of features, and we must include all of them in all that we do: education, policy engagement, resilience preparation. It's all there. Thank you so much, Marco. A reminder to everyone joining us, welcome, and please do keep your questions coming in on the chat. We're having a Q&A session at the end where we'll put all of these questions to our speakers. At this point, I'm going to thank Marco and welcome Sanaa to the stage. The paleontologists in the room will remember Sanaa from her wonderful presentation in the Symposium of the Paleontological Association in December of 2020. Sanaa, how are you today? Oh, I think your microphone is off. Just flick on your microphone.
Is it on? Yeah.
Coming through perfectly. Sanaa is one of the pioneering paleontological researchers from Egypt. We are very pleased to have her joining us here again today to talk about community engagement with paleontological research. I'll call up your slides. There they are. Without further ado, we are very much looking forward to hearing about virtual paleontology and community engagement from Egypt.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your interest in your talk. When we say Egypt, many of you will call the pyramids, the monuments, and all of that history that Egypt have. And in fact, not only the foreigners know that about Egypt. Egypt to Egyptian too was for a long time only about monuments. But what many of you don't know that Egypt has a far deeper history in vertebrate paleontology with marvelous fossils that have been unearthed from Egypt at various decades. But unfortunately, all of the work that has been done in Egypt for over more than a century was about foreigners coming to Egypt, digging our fossils and taking them to study and publication outside of Egypt without real engagement of the Egyptians in this process. So the history of Egypt started in 1884 with the German paleontologist August Schweinfurth when he worked in the Fayoum, and then the work of Duke University that worked in the Fayoum for over a decade, working in the Jabal Qatrani area and unearthing marvelous fossils like the Egyptopithecus fossil that you see in here, which is very, very important fossils in the history of the human evolution. Another marvelous place in Egypt for vertebrate fossils is Wadi al-Hitan, which has extraordinary fossil whale skeletons preserved in the area, housing the missing link whale, the Basilosaurus islet, important fossil in the history of in the evolution story of whales. Also, there are work that has been done in the Bahariya Oasis with Ernest Stromer that discovered 4 dinosaurs from Egypt, including the most famous one of them, Spinosaurus. I think many of you are aware of that dinosaurs. But as you see, all of this work was done by foreigners without no real engagement of Egyptian in the process. But all of this has changed in 2010 when my supervisor, Dr. Hisham Salam, got his PhD from the University of Oxford on vertebrate paleontology, and he came back to Egypt with a dream in his mind of creating a school of vertebrate paleontology in Egypt that is dedicated to educating the Egyptian about their heritage. In MUVP, we have 6 schools. 2 of them are mainly dedicated toward engagement of the society at different levels in the field of vertebrate paleontology. The first and the most important one of them is training the next generation of Egyptian paleontologists from different universities and to create careers, students who will eventually have their PhDs in vertebrate paleontology at different institutions in Egypt that will help us to promote the idea or promote the culture of the vertebrate paleontology and the work that we are doing in MUVP to different audiences all around Egypt. And in 2011, it was the first ever vertebrate paleontology exhibition that was mainly from Egyptian students run by Egyptian vertebrate paleontologists, Dr. Hisham Salam and Dr. Muhammad Samah. And from this moment, several exhibitions has followed on at different places in Egypt, in the Dakhla Oasis and places in the Eastern Desert and in the Bahariya Oasis, the land of dinosaurs in Egypt. All of these field trips were actual research field trips dedicated to training the next generation of Egyptian students. And here are photos from one of our last field trips last January in the Bahariya Oasis. And you can see Dr. Hisham Salam in the middle, and beside him, this is me on the left. The second generation of Egyptian students in MUVP, and the others are the third generation of students in MUVP. All of them are from different universities in Egypt. So this is the last day of this trip, where some kids from the Bahariya itself joined us in our exhibition, and they were very happy to help in unearthing a partial skeleton of a dinosaur. You can see how happy they are for engaging in this process or in this adventure, as they have described it to us. But also, we don't have field trips only specific for researchers. We have another field work trip that we call training field trip for anyone who is interested in invertebrate paleontology, who has passion for it, but he is not looking for pursuing a career in vertebrate paleontology. So we initiate field trip for those who are interested to come and join us in our research work at different places in Egypt. They come and they stay with us in the camps, and we actually train them on actual fossils. We take them to our actual working sites and supervise them in excavation and extraction of vertebrate fossils. So it's not like training on something that is not real. So they are actually helping us in our research, and they know that and they appreciate it. And one of the most important things that we have done through this training program is we have managed to salvage a fossil site that we have in Fayoum that was destroyed by agriculture, most of it. But through the training program and through many students that have helped us, we have managed to save a big part of this site, and we are aiming to continue this training field trips with other students to save the other part of the site. So students, they know that they are working on actual fossils, and they appreciate it. Another place that we take a student to is Wadi al-Hitan. Wadi al-Hitan has an open-air museum with dozens of skeletons that are in display in the open-air museum that always need careful preparation and maintenance at many times. So we take students and we train them on this process. And this is actually the last trip that we have been to this place was, I think, last month. And this is Hind. our youngest trainee that joined our expedition. Hind, in this photo, was about 3 months. I think she is 5 now. She was young, but I think she liked the desert. She liked being with us in the desert, watching us doing what we do. She was funny. She came with her mom to this field trip. Another angle that we are working through engaging our society is working with the Egyptian Environmental Affairs Agency and the UNDP toward creating different museums in Egypt that anyone can visit and take the knowledge of vertebrate paleontology. In 2015, we have working with the Egyptian Environmental Affairs Agency and creating the Fossil and Climate Change Museum in Wadi al-Hitan itself to display the different climate that has been in Fayoum for over millions of years to the present. And through working with them, we have working on excavating the largest skeleton of the famous Basilosaurus isis whale that is in display in the museum. And we are working continuously with them through our training program to bring a student that help in also the preparation and the maintenance of the fossils in that museum, and also creating that museums and the other museums that I will talk about also help the local community, because we provide work slots for them, and we provide working environment that they can join. So we are actually benefiting the community that we are working on. And everything from in this museum, the design, the material that used to build is coming from the community itself. So we are using the community resources to add museums to them that they can benefit from it. Another museum that we have worked on is the open air museum in Jabal Qatrani, worked on in 2017, where you can see various fossils that lived in the Jabal Qatrani area back at that time, with labels and a few things that explain what you are looking at. It's a really neat museum in the middle of the desert in Jabal Qatrani area. But we didn't only create the museum in that area. We also had a series of workshops to the local tour guide that actually big tourists and show them places in Fayoum. So we make a workshop for them and introduce this museum and the specimens in it for them, and encourage them to bring tourists to these sites and show them how they can properly do this and show the tourists the fossils in it without actually damaging anything. And they were very responsive, and they started bringing many tourists that are visiting this museum. Another museum that we are working on is the Fayoum Nature Culture House in Fayoum. This museum was actually the work in this museum was actually funded by the national banks in Egypt, who funded the creation of this museum. This museum, you can see also some artifacts from the Fayoum that display the history of the pharaohs and Romans that lived in the Fayoum, besides the Fayoum natural history of vertebrate fossils. So we mixed the two heritage of the Fayoum in one place that you can go and see. And this place is actually managed 100% by the locals in the Fayoum. So we have no authority, or the EEE have no authority on it. So it was made for the local people to benefit from, or to show the people their heritage in there. Another training program that we have in MUVP is actually training the students inside the lab on the methods of excavation and the methods of preparations and identification of vertebrate fossils. You can see we have multiple students coming continuously to the lab, and they are actually working, as they do in the field, they are working on actual specimens, helping us on our research projects, and they know that and they appreciate it. And as you can see in here, and in this photo, they are actually working on jacketing one of our fossils to prepare it to be flipped to the other side. I believe this was like a snake fossil or something. Another thing that we do in MUVP is our lab, although it is a research lab, we also welcome everyone who is interested to see our science in action or see fossils and real fossils to come to our lab. And special guests in our lab are kids. We we welcome kids to visit our lab and we show them everything. We give them special tours in MUVP. We show them things that we don't show to adult ones, because we believe that we are investing in the young generation of people who will take over our place one day. And we actually arrange some small field trips for kids who are interested in vertebrate paleontology or have passion for it. So we arrange field trips specifically for those ones, as you see in this picture. And various school visits come to visit MUVB, and they come and see us working in action, and we give them a tour in MUVB and answer their question, and they leave our lab happy. We don't only accept visits in MUVB. When we are doing field work in diverse places in Egypt, we welcome a school invitation to go there and actually give the students there some lectures about the heritage in the area, and to introduce our work to them. Like this picture was in Dakhla Oasis in 2019 in a prep school over there. And you can see multiple students come to MUVB for visit. But not only students, other professors at different colleges in Mansoura University or outside Mansoura University come to see our research in action. Another important thing is the science communication in MUVB. We write Arabic articles to magazines about our discoveries in MUVB, about the latest discoveries in vertebrate paleontology. And actually, Shugul Ashkar, the lab manager in MUVB, she has a podcast on Facebook in Arabic dedicated to telling the people about the vertebrate paleontology and the latest discoveries, but in Arabic, because we lack something like this in our region, and she is actually good at what she is doing. All of these outreach activities that we are doing has been its cost, as I could say. When one of the locals contacted one of MUVB students saying that he has seen some kind of structure in a marble slab that he have, and when we actually go there and examine those slabs, there was actually a whale skull and some vertebrae preserved in 6 slabs of marble. He knew that because he was listening to hafrology and the Hafragi podcasts in vertebrate paleontology, and he knew that something like this could happen. And he always have seen pictures of the fossil that we post on Facebook and on social media, and he managed to say that this is something that could be a vertebrate fossil. So he contacted us, and it turned out to be a whale fossil preserved in marble, which was marvelous. We managed in MUVB through 10 years to have students from diverse from diverse regions in Egypt. We have students from Asyut, from Mansoura, from Banha, from Alexandria universities. And actually, the students that you see in here are the ones who are managing our outreach programs in MUVB under the supervision of Dr. Hisham Sallam. So we are so proud of them. All of the research work that we are doing in MUVB and also our outreach programs are in collaboration with various institutes inside and outside of Egypt. And at the end, I would like to thank you all for your interest, and I hope that you enjoyed my talk, and I welcome any question that you have to be sent on the chat or into my email. Thank you.
Thank you for a brilliant talk. I think everyone will agree that it's always inspirational when you can see people building a genuine connection with their communities, and even more so when you look at the work that Sanaa and all the team in Egypt are doing at using the natural heritage of the area for sustainable economic development. So thank you so much for joining us today, and apologies just at the moment you were finishing your talk that I disappeared. But I'm back now, and fingers crossed we can join Elsa Pancharoli, who is hopefully joining us. Elsa, how are you?
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Everything is wonderful. We were having a few connection issues. I'm really pleased to welcome Elsa here today. Elsa is a colleague at the museum and is going to tell us a little bit about a wonderful project that she's been involved with in Scotland, specifically looking at rural Scotland and engaging young local people with their geo-heritage. So without further ado, please take it away, Elsa.
Okay, you'll have to forgive me a bit if this goes a bit wonky. I had to reconnect on a laptop, so it's a bit sort of all over the place, but welcome to my talk. I'm going to be using a sort of case study to illustrate how fossils can be used as a basis for geoconservation outreach and education in rural schools, in this case in my home country of Scotland. Now, fingers crossed, the slide goes forward. Yes, it does. Brilliant. Okay, so I'm aware that we have this wonderfully international audience, and I hope that many of you have been welcomed to Scotland as a visitor at some point in the past. But if you're unfamiliar with it, Scotland is the most northerly country in the UK. It has about 5.5 million people in its population, but most of them are concentrated in our 3 major cities, which are shown in the map here. Now, a large portion of Scotland is considered very remote and rural, as designated by the Scottish Government, and here it is coloured in dark green. Now, this area is known, broadly speaking, as the Highlands and Islands. It's sparsely populated, and this is mostly the legacy of the clearances. This is when the indigenous populations were encouraged to leave the area between the sort of 17 and 1800s to make way for sheep farming and deer estates. So this has resulted in sort of ongoing impacts for the region's economic development, as well as things like indigenous Gaelic language and culture. Now, the Highlands and Islands also provide many of the sort of foundational examples of geological principles in the early science of geology. And these stunning landscapes are still studied by geologists today. So national and international universities take countless student groups there each year to carry out fieldwork and training in the geosciences. So in terms of geotourism, it's sort of really internationally recognised for its wealth of geological sites that tell us not only about Scotland's geology, but the world's. But despite this, and despite its recognition in schemes like the 51 Best Places to See Scotland's Geology, this region, they rarely receive feedback from the academic and research community into the local community. And this can really leave people in these regions without access to the scientific knowledge of their own landscapes. So with this in mind, I decided to apply for the Paleontological Association's engagement grant to deliver a series of workshops in rural schools in Scotland. Now, because I'm a paleontologist and also because they're fun, I decided to centre these workshops around fossils because they are like a really easy hook, a sort of gateway into geoscience. Now, the content of the workshop was tied into the Scottish school curriculum, and I received support and resources from a number of really generous partners who I'll mention in future slides. So I worked with a graphic designer to create bespoke branded materials for these workshops. This included a flyer which advertised it to schools. Now, I obtained a list of all the different schools in the Highlands and Islands from some contacts I have at the University of the Highlands and Islands STEM outreach team. And I was able to email all these schools the flyer, and particularly those in the Isle of Skye, which is where I do my own fieldwork. And I really feel it's important to feed back into the community where I do so much of my own work. And I emphasised particularly the flexibility of my timing to deliver these talks, and that the workshop was free, and that distance was no object. And I did hear back from several that said, oh, well, you know, I'd love you to visit, but I'm too far away. And it was great to be able to say, nope, you're not too far away. No matter where you are, I can get to your school. I wanted to make sure that the schools also had something physical at the end of my visit. So one of the things I did was create a schools activity pack, and this was filled with really good fun resources. Some of them included here things like colouring in and drawing and word searches. And some of those were adapted from things I found online, for example, developed by the British Geological Survey at various museums, all of whom I credited in the activity pack. I also included donated books and flyers. For example, Dunedin Press donated an Introduction to Paleontology guide, but I also got stuff from NatureScot and the Scottish Geodiversity Forum. And this just meant that I could give the schools a kind of really fun package of things once I had left after the workshop. I also spent some of the funds on printing out 3D prints of fossils. You can see at the bottom there, that is a jaw of a mammal that we found on the Isle of Skye, Middle Jurassic in age. And we printed it out enlarged and also included an information sheet about what it was, but not just that, but also what is 3D printing, all written in accessible language for young people and teachers. So as you can imagine, reaching schools in the rural Highlands and Islands was quite a logistical challenge. So I set a really achievable goal. I wanted to visit 2 schools per day over a 2-week period in May 2019. So here you can see all the red dots show the locations of the different schools that I was able to visit over that time period. And the majority of my budget was spent on travel and accommodation as a result of these distances, but the rest was on the materials themselves that we produced. And I spoke to around about 300 pupils between the ages of 5 and 12, from the smallest school, which was on the Isle of Egg, which has a total of 5 pupils, to the largest school, which was in Loch Carron, which has 42 pupils. In the whole school, I should emphasise, not just in one class. Now, the workshop itself was split into 3 parts. So first, there was an interactive PowerPoint, which contained most of the sort of information, but questions were encouraged throughout. Then there was a fossil handling session, which was by far what the kids, I have to say, loved the most. And then a game, which was a fun way to end the workshop and surreptitiously also taught them some stuff. So the kids were overjoyed to have a real-life paleontologist visit them. And the fossil handling session, as I say, was probably their favourite bit. Now, all schools in Scotland, even the very smallest ones, have interactive technology. So I knew my PowerPoint basically could be played anywhere that I visited. Now, the PowerPoint itself was split into 3 sections, and I tied all of the content into the Scottish Curriculum for Excellence, particularly areas like skills building, scientific inquiry, ecosystems, climate change, evolution, and digital technologies. And this meant that the teachers themselves could integrate this workshop into their teaching framework of their school. So the first part, as you see, was like the science of geology. So what is geological time? What are fossils? Then the second part, I used specific examples of fossils around Scotland, not just to talk about them themselves, but the story of evolution through deep time and also landscape evolution. And by narrativizing it in this way, the kids were really able to engage with the content and understand the concepts that we were talking about. And then the final section was focusing on skills and also on geoconservation. Now, when I talked about skills, I wanted to bring up things that they maybe wouldn't have considered. So as well as obviously maths and science, also coding and art and communication and teamwork, to show them that, you know, to basically break out of the mold of what a scientist is and how you can become one. Then, in order to inspire them to be geoconservators in the future and to be the stewards of their own environment, we talked about the fossil code. So Scotland actually has its own special fossil code, and it's a great piece of guidance created by NatureScot, formerly Scottish Natural Heritage, and sets out the best practice for collecting, identifying and conserving and storing fossils that are found in Scotland. So it aims to boost public interest in Scotland's fossil heritage as a resource for sort of educational and recreational purposes. Now, it boils down is maybe not the right word, but you can see on the side there, on the left-hand side, there are essentials of the fossil code, but they are quite long. There's 6 of them. They're rather long, and it's not entirely clear to a member of the public what steps they should be taking, and it's particularly not child-friendly. It uses a few geoconservation terms, the sort of lingo that the public are generally not that familiar with. So for my workshops, I boiled it down to just 4 essential things that were clear and easy to understand for anyone of any age. And they covered really important things like asking for permission and looking after yourself when you go fossil hunting. And most of the kids I spoke to, they had already been fossil hunting before, and they were incredibly receptive to this idea that if they followed the fossil code, they were basically being real scientists. So I felt that it really went down extremely well, and hopefully I've inspired a few of them to be the sort of custodians of their own natural heritage into the future. So the fossil handling session, yeah, definitely the most popular part. These fossils were loaned to me from National Museums Scotland, from their educational collections. So they had been very well handled before, and licked, I should add as well. Which maybe in a post-COVID world is not what you want. So yeah, they were handed around among the school kids, and meanwhile I also had a slide on the screen which showed the fossil, but not necessarily what it was, and I invited the kids to be detectives and try to work out from a few clues I gave them what the fossil might be before I actually revealed it, and they really, really enjoyed that. Now, finally, I ended the workshop with a fossilization game, which was based on something I found online, and I expanded and refined it for use in the workshop. So the concept is to basically teach them that not all animals become fossils, and also the many ways in which they might become fossils or might not. I themed it around the Isle of Skye's Jurassic ecosystem. And I designed and laminated these cards so that they could be used in a sort of game setting in a sort of kid-friendly way. So the game is played, just to give you an idea, the game is played by the pupils first selecting a card at random, which tells them what animal they are and what they eat in their ecosystem. And then they're given about sort of 5 minutes to role play, which, as you can imagine, is pretty lively. They all go a bit crazy and get very excited. But then they're all told suddenly to freeze and drop. And they're given a chance to select a second random card, which tells them if they've become a fossil or not. Now, if they have, they stay on the floor, and if they haven't, they have to stand off to the side of the room. As you can imagine, those that had to stand at the side of the room seemed pretty disappointed at first, but then they are told that they are now paleontologists, and they have to walk around finding out what fossils are lying on the floor in the future and interpret them. And I prompt them by asking a few different questions, which you can see on the screen here. And it kind of highlights things like fossil record bias and what it is that paleontologists actually do to understand fossils and the environments that they are found in. So one of the really fun outcomes and ways to sort of measure the success of the competition, of the workshop, was to hold a competition, thanks Jack, an art competition. And you can see here some of the prizes that the winners were able to receive. And a lot of these were donated from people, for example, Angus Miller, formerly of the Scottish Geodiversity Forum, now a trustee of the Scottish Geology Trust, and many others that I've already mentioned earlier. And we received 127 entries from 7 schools. Entries they kind of gave me an informal form of feedback as well, because I got to see which things really stayed in the kids' minds. Lots of trilobites and ammonites, as you can see, but also a few slightly unusual things, including paleontologists at work, and also whole ecosystem reconstruction. So it's quite good fun. I also did an adult feedback form as well for the teachers, and I asked them basically to sort of evaluate how the talk had gone, whether they would have me come back again, things like that. And really the results were overwhelmingly positive. And one of the things that they often highlighted is how great it was to have this workshop when they were so far away from cities, and other people really didn't tend to do that. So yeah, I was quite delighted with the feedback I got at the end. So I'm hoping to run these workshops again. Obviously, 2 things: funding permitting, but also, of course, COVID permitting. We don't really know quite where we are with that in terms of school visits yet. So that's my talk, but I'd like to just leave you with a very, very quick plug. I hope Jack will forgive me, for the Scottish Geology Trust, which is a new charity that has just started in the last year, of which I am now a trustee. And we aim to inspire people everywhere, including kids, but adults as well, to love and care for Scotland's incredible geological heritage. So I hope that you will visit our website and consider supporting our work in the future. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much to Elsa. You can see from the chat that everyone is incredibly impressed and inspired by your talk. And I think you perfectly show a wonderful example of how researchers can fulfill their obligations to the communities which they are often seasonal visitors to. So there are lots of people in the chat very inspired to take your message away. At that point, I'm going to thank Elsa again. Apologies for the technical issues, but you ploughed straight through, and we are going to zoom over to Professor Stephen Loisel. And after Elsa's perfectly acceptable shout out to the wonderful work of the Scottish Geology Trust, I am more than happy to give a shameless plug to the wonderful work that Stephen does within Earthwatch Europe, which is a charity very close to my heart. I'm a trustee of this charity, and it's a wonderful opportunity to bring them in, and the wonderful work they're doing, particularly around citizen science, as an opportunity for public engagement. We should also remember that geodiversity is not just about hard rocks like this wonderful granite column behind me. It also includes all of abiotic nature, including rivers and freshwater systems and all the processes involved in that. So we're very much looking forward to hearing Stephen talk to us about the work of the Freshwater Watch programme in Earthwatch Europe. And at that moment, I will hopefully bring up the slides. Stephen, how are you today? We'll just check that your sound is working lovely.
Yes, excellent. Nice to see some brilliant presentations, Jack. Brilliant presentation.
Well, thank you to all the people who've spoken before you. And at that point, sure, I will hand over to you, Stephen. Thanks so much.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jack. Thanks for all of you for joining. I'm Stephen Loisel. I work with Earthwatch Europe, which is now underneath my picture, which and Earthwatch Europe does projects all over the globe. It's focused on conserving or empowering people to conserve their resources, their biological resources, their abiotic resources. And I'm a freshwater scientist, so I work in freshwaters trying to understand the impacts of climate change, the impacts of changing the landscape. So any project, this initiative to create a Geodiversity Day is absolutely brilliant, because we can see from the freshwater perspective what World Water Day has done, and it's opened up all kinds of doors. It's gotten lots of people more aware of what's going on. So the idea of a Geodiversity Day is brilliant and should go in the direction. Obviously, what happens in the landscape has a direct impact on what happens in our freshwater resources, and so we work very closely with your colleagues across the globe. The project I would like to speak about today is called Freshwater Watch. Earthwatch does all kinds of projects on forests, on agricultural systems, on freshwater, and the project that I've been working on for the last too many years, probably 8 or 9 years at this point, is the Freshwater Watch, which is a global program. It's a global platform that empowers people to manage and monitor their environment. And I'm going to show you a couple examples here of how it works. But as you can see, our projects are spread across the globe, and they're generated differently in different places. But the idea is that they bring together different partners, different stakeholders, to come up with ways to better manage and better monitor the environment. And let's jump into a couple of these. So one that's closest to Oxford is Wild Oxfordshire, and it's a wonderful project that was started essentially by just a couple of people very worried about their local stream. Their the Evenlode River has had several impacts on it from different sources. So sometimes from wastewater treatment, sometimes from agriculture, and there were a series of local citizens who were very concerned about this, and they wanted to help the Environment Agency, and they wanted to help resolve some of these things. So we, together with them, created a freshwater watch program here and along the Evenlode, and these citizens have been monitoring for several years now, and they've created an expanding community of people who are concerned about the river, who are monitoring the river, who are working with stakeholders to try to improve the quality of the river. And that interest in that that activity has generated collaborations with UK's Environment Agency, with the local water company, and it's created a real change in the river. And now there's a whole series of smart catchment approaches that are being used to make sure that what happens within the landscape goes to the benefit of the river, goes to the benefit of these resources. Another interesting project moving far away from Oxford and the UK is in Guangdong, China. So the Pearl River, which is one of the largest rivers in the world and the third largest river in China, has some serious problems because there's lots of agricultural activities happening in the catchment. And the university, the South China Agricultural University, in particular, Professor Li, wanted to try to create some change within the catchment. So using, of course, research in specific areas, but extending that out to citizen scientists allowed more people to gather more information. And while he tested different kinds of farm practices and agricultural approaches, the citizen scientists were able to validate the change that occurred along the river and along its tributaries. So this working together between researchers, local communities, and then eventually the provincial government made a real change in Guangdong, and the condition is significantly improved compared to what it was just a few years ago. Another fun example is our colleagues and friends in Brazil. Brazilian citizen scientists are the most energetic and the most unrelentless citizen scientists on the planet. So a shout out to any Brazilians who are out there. A colleague, Davi Cunha from the University of Sao Paulo, set up projects in 3 major cities in Brazil, looking at the streams, the small streams that are under monitored and under managed around these cities, and then at the conclusion of that, coming up with recommendations to improve them. And actually, these citizen scientists were, in several cases, the ones to find a problem and then report it to the Brazilian Environmental Agency to be corrected. An ongoing project with a group of citizens is in a reservoir near São Paulo, near São Carlos. And in this project, there's a whole group of citizen scientists that you can see on the top were monitoring the status of this reservoir, which in certain periods of the year, due to what happens in the catchment around the lake, where there's a high nutrient, particular high phosphorus load getting into the lake, goes through a whole series of algal blooms, some of which are microcystin, microtoxin producing algal blooms, which have impacts on the people then using that water. So this group of citizen scientists is doing a service for the whole community through this very, very interesting and important project. Another interesting example, again, jumping back across the ocean, is what we're doing now in Lake Tanganyika. Lake Tanganyika is, as you know, the longest lake in the world, the deepest lake in the world, and one of the most important water bodies in the world, but it's going through a massive change in the landscape around. There's more and more people moving there, there's more and more activities occurring along the lake shore. And this is impacting the resource that these communities are depending on, the lake water. So we've set up a citizen science project there together with Tafiri on the Tanzanian side, and there's a series of villages, communities along the lake shore that are now monitoring the water quality, all using the same methods. So the interesting thing about the Freshwater Watch is the methods have been developed and quality controlled to be something that citizen scientists can do and then and gather information that's then useful. And that can be compared to Environment Agency information, measurements. And the nice thing is that a measurement in Lake Tanganyika can be compared to a measurement in Oxford, which can be compared to a measurement on the the Pearl River. So all the measurements are done in the same manner, following the same training, using the same quality control. So what's happening on Lake Tanganyika is the communities are measuring the quality of the water along the shore and comparing that to what activities occur within their community. So trying to improve the situation so that the water quality along the lake on which they depend continues to be a relatively good water quality, or improves in some cases. Another interesting project was in Mauritius, where the scouts this time started to work with farmers to try to reduce the amount of nutrient infiltration and nutrient runoff from their fields. And this, again, was impacting the water supply for a whole region in Mauritius. And through the activities of these scouts, who, again, were trained using the same procedures, using the same methods as everywhere else in the world, there was a series of interventions that were made to help the farmers to reduce their impact. So again, looking on a landscape catchment level, what can people do? And these people in this case were the young people, the scouts, who went out and then made these changes and worked with the Central Water Authority and the Mauritius Biological Association to find solutions to some of the major problems that they were having. Another interesting project that just started a couple of years ago is the work on the Kafue and Zambezi catchments in Zambia. So Zambia is one of the leading countries for trying to get citizen science to be part of what they use to monitor their environment. And in fact, Zambia is now focusing on using citizen science data to do the reporting to the Sustainable Development Goals, which the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. 632 has some has some reporting requirements that are about water quality, and those water quality reporting requirements are often not performed. So of the 180 countries in the world, I think on the last reporting period there was probably 100, 110. Some countries didn't report them because they didn't have the available information. And Zambia is taking the first step to use citizen science information and integrate that with their regular monitoring information to provide to meet this international objective of reporting on water quality, surface water quality of their country. So again, pushing boundaries using citizen science, using in this case the Freshwater Watch, and it's been very successful. They've had some great feedback from the communities and some interesting changes in how people perceive this resource. Looking more towards the future, or not, this is the very short future, but in the beginning of May this year, there'll be a pan-European citizen science event, which we call the Pan-European Water Blitz. And in this project, in this program, the Freshwater Watch is used in a more simplified manner, but the nice thing is it gets thousands of people from major cities in Europe to go out and monitor information about water quality and about the local environment that then is used by the Environment Agency and researchers in all these cities to try to help find change, help improve these water quality, these ecosystems to provide good water quality. And so this is an interesting project because it occurs across Europe in major cities all on the same weekend. So we have hundreds of people from Paris, hundreds of people from Luxembourg, hundreds of people in the Irish. We get up even to thousands of people in Ireland, and hundreds of people in the London area up to Oxford to go out and take measurements on the same weekend. And interesting, we usually have there's a certain number of these kits available to the participants, and we usually sell out. We don't sell them; they participate for free. But the registration runs out within 48 hours from when it's announced. Thanks, Jack. So it's a popular event where people who don't normally get out and feel responsible for their environment are going out and doing exactly that. So in the Thames region, so in the UK, between London and Oxford, this has been going on for 6 or 7 years and has had some great impacts, great feedback. The Environment Agency is using this data, CEH is using this data, Earthwatch is using this data to build models and try to find out how we can improve these rivers, these lakes, these streams. So that's happening, as I said, in the beginning of May. There'll be another blitz probably in the autumn, and we're hoping to have a large, perhaps pan-global urban blitz in 2022. The last thing I wanted to talk about is what's happening in the not so short future, but the far future. So a lot of the things that how our environment is managed, how our environment is monitored, depends a lot on who's out there and who's gathering information, what information is being provided to the stakeholders and the public. So right now, citizen science is growing and is allowing people to understand a lot about their information, but there's all different kinds of citizen science. So we're working through a European project called Monocle, integrating Earthwatch's Freshwater Watch into a system where information can come from drones, information can come from satellites, information can come from fixed stations, both in the water and above, to bring all information into a common package, into a common platform that will then allow people, if it's the public access, or allow public access, but also allow governments and environment agencies to be using this integrated information to better understand what's happening in the environment. And when something changes within the landscape, within the land use, how that impacts the quality of our surface water bodies. So the future is looking very bright. Putting all this information into a package that people can use and people can understand is more complicated, but we're working in that direction thanks to the Monocle project. So that's it for me. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to any questions you may have. Jack, over to you.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for a wonderful, wonderful talk, and making us all think how perhaps we can inspire people to get involved with our research with citizen science. We've got some questions already, but do keep those coming in the chat. We will now go over to Lucy Crane, which is rather appropriate with the column I am standing in front of today, which is the it's from Llanlivery in Cornwall. So it is appropriate that our final talk of the day, we are going to speak to Lucy Crane from Cornish Lithium, who's going to speak to us about sustainable mining. It should also be said that Lucy is a very prominent voice in groups such as Women in Mining, and has given a wonderful TEDx talk, which you can find on the Geodiversity Day website under our section on how geodiversity is associated with all the sustainable development goals. Apologies to everyone and our speakers that we are running a bit behind, but when you're having so much fun with geodiversity, you can't rush these things. I will call up Lucy's slides. Thank you again for joining us today, and take it away.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Jack. And a huge thanks to all of the speakers who've gone before me. It's been absolutely fascinating. So I'll do my best to try and live up to the high standards that they've set, and to hold your attention for the last 15 minutes of talks on this event today. So as Jack said, I'm going to be talking to you about mining and the importance of actually sustainably using our georesources. You know, geodiversity has such an important role in providing humanity with the goods and services that we actually need to live and to have civilized societies. And so that's what I'm going to try and cover. And then I'll talk a little bit about the work that we're doing at Cornish Lithium, and then round things off with some thoughts on actual diversity in the geoscience industry. You're very welcome to read the disclaimer later on. So I wanted to start off by talking about word association that people often have with the mining industry. And around the world, you know, historically, the mining industry has had a really bad reputation that in parts of the world it definitely deserves. You know, when you ask people what springs to mind when they think of the mining industry, particularly members of the public or people who aren't involved in it, often they'll have very negative connotations with the mining industry, talk about how it's wasteful. People equate it to coal mining and picture people coming up from pits covered in dark dust from coal. And overwhelmingly, people talk about how bad it is for the environment. In contrast to that, when you then talk about renewable energy, people recognize how important that's going to be in combating climate change. But actually, if we want to produce these wind turbines and these solar panels, then that's going to be hugely mineral intensive. So what we need to do is embrace the geodiversity that we have around the world and use that, work with it to responsibly extract these resources that are in the earth to actually help us meet these aims. And as geoscientists, as I believe many of us on this call are, we are actually in a really unique position to help us do that. We're trained in geodiversity. We're trained and we understand how to explore for and access the Earth's resources. And it really is, I think, part of our responsibility as geoscientists to act as stewards, to act as responsible stewards of this amazing natural capital that we have around the world. Education is really important as well. But I think this is a really key phrase that I want to focus on for the rest of this talk. And it's that if we're not able to grow something, if we're not able to grow materials, then we have to extract them from the ground. And that is everything we use in our daily lives, whether it's the houses that we live in, the cars that we drive, the buildings, the roads that we drive on, the mobile phones that we use, the laptops we're all connecting to each other all around the world from today. Everything is hugely mineral resource intensive. And actually, as we want to move away from an economy that's driven by fossil fuels and transition to one that's using renewable energies instead, then we need to actually mine a huge amount of raw materials to actually allow us to make this energy transition. To put that into context, the World Bank have done some fantastic research into, quite how mineral intensive is this energy transition going to be. And there's just a couple of mind-boggling statistics that I'd like to share with you. The first one is about lithium. So lithium is an element that's a metal, it's the lightest weight metal, and it's actually got a really high charge density as well. So if you want a battery to be lightweight and portable, then lithium-ion batteries are really great for that. The first lithium-ion battery was actually commercialized in 1991, and since then there's been a huge explosion in demand, especially over the last few years. Lithium-ion batteries are used in your mobile phone battery, they're used in your laptop battery, but actually where we're seeing this huge uptick in demand is because they're used in electric car batteries as well. And as the UK government, for example, is banning the sale of petrol and diesel engine cars from 2030, every new vehicle on the road must be electric after that. And that's happening in various places all around the world. And so it's really driving this huge increase in demand for lithium. And that's just one example. If you take into account that on average in the mining industry, it can take 10 years from finding something to actually extracting it commercially, then that means as an industry, we've got a huge job to do over the next couple of decades if we want to be able to find all of these natural resources that are going to facilitate the energy transition. So 965% increase in lithium demand expected by 2050 from what was produced a couple of years ago. But you can see here that cobalt, you need 585% more, graphite, nearly 400% more. And one statistic that really blew my mind in this report is that the World Bank estimate that, so when people say, well, why can't we just recycle everything that's currently in circulation? Absolutely, we need to be thinking about building in circular economy design to everything that we do. We need to make our products much more easily recyclable. We need to educate people that they do need to recycle. But the World Bank estimate that in the last 5,000 years, humanity has extracted about 550 million tons of copper. And they reckon that we need that same amount of copper, another 550 million tons in the next 25 years. And that's because we want to combat climate change, everything's being electrified, and obviously copper wiring plays a big part in that. But also we've got a growing global population and we've got a growing middle class of people around the world as well. So it's a huge task to do. And that really, really, really means that we need to be doing it as sustainably and as responsibly as we possibly can do. And as geoscientists, people who understand geodiversity, how to work with it, we are going to have to play a really key role in that. And Stephen, in the previous talk, mentioned the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and these are really key. Responsible mineral extraction actually has the opportunity to responsible mineral extraction actually has the opportunity to contribute positively to all 17 of the UN SDGs. Obviously, there's some that have more of an influence than others, and it depends which region of the world you're in. But, you know, towards sustainable cities and communities, towards climate action, to help reduce inequalities, you know, we can have a socio-economic impact through sustainable mineral development, but actually you can also have positive impacts on the environment. So that's fantastic. But what are we actually doing? So as an example, I want to talk for a little bit about the company that I work for, Cornish Lithium. We're exploring for lithium right down in the southwest of the UK. To set the scene for that slightly, I want to show this map first. And you can see it's a few years out of date now, because amazingly 2017 was 4 years ago, but it shows where lithium is kind of produced around the world, and it pretty much holds true still. And what you can see is that most of the world's lithium either comes from a hard rock deposit in South America, so the mineral called spodumene they extract a lot of, or from these salar, these salty brine deposits that form in the Atacama Desert and other places in South America that are very arid. A lot of the world's lithium demand is actually from North America, China, Europe, and it's growing in Africa and it's growing in other parts of the world. But you can see that there's no significant production of lithium in any of those places. And so the race really is on. And that isn't because there aren't lithium deposits in these places. You know, lithium's not that rare. Finding it in places where it's economically viable to extract, where it's concentrated enough to extract it, is it's a bit of a different ball game. But until very recently, we've just been able to ramp up production in Australia and South America to help meet this increase in global demand for lithium. But as it's increasing so much, and it's expected to, almost be rising exponentially over the next couple of decades, it means we need to look in other places. We need to embrace new technologies to allow us to look in more remote locations. So use satellite imagery to help us find targets, for example, in more remote locations. We might need to look deeper undercover in certain parts of the world. The outcropping things have potentially been found. But also, perversely, we also need to look closer to home, especially in places such as Europe and North America, where there's been very little mineral extraction in the last few decades. It's because there's been this NIMBY, not in my backyard attitude to mineral extraction. People don't want to mine down the road from them because it might be dusty, it might be noisy, it might be dirty. They'd much rather, they'll still use the products of that mine, but they'd much rather outsource the actual impacts of it to somewhere else. And so perversely, I think we're also going to be seeing a lot more exploration in these parts of the world where it's closer to home. So what are we doing in Cornwall? In Cornwall, so this is the southwest of the UK, the bit that pokes out in the bottom left. And the whole region is underlain by hot, lithium-enriched granite. So the blobs that you can see on the map here, that's where it outcrops at the surface, but actually it's all joined up at depth. It's a big batholith. And this granite's important not only because it's enriched in lithium compared to many other granites worldwide, but it's also hot. So this is a heat map of the UK done by the British Geological Survey, and you can see that there literally is a hotspot over the southwest of the UK. And that means we've got potential for geothermal energy down here as well. Historically, mining has been happening, mineral extraction, particularly of tin and copper, has been happening in Cornwall for at least 5,000 years. We've got evidence of over 3,000 tin and copper mines across the whole county. And this mineralization is contained within geological structures, which we can talk about a bit more later. But what this means is that we've got a huge amount of information about the subsurface from the historic mining industry here. And so we use that in a smart way, using the ability to use digital mapping and create 3D digital models of the subsurface to allow us to actually efficiently target things without having to do much invasive exploration. And then this is a section here from 1864, and it is from an academic paper that was written at the time, and you won't be able to read it here, but basically in Cornwall, when they were mining for tin and copper, so that hasn't really been done for the last 30 or 40 years, but from the 1800s through to the end of the 20th century, mining for tin and copper has been a really big thing. They had to dewater the mines so they could mine to deeper and deeper levels, and they had to pump waters out. And so some of the waters that they were pumping out were meteoric rainwaters that trickled down from the surface, But actually, in certain parts of Cornwall, they also had to pump out a lot of this upwelling warm waters, these upwelling geothermal waters. In 1864, Professor Miller from King's College in London came and took some samples of these upwelling warm waters from a deep mine in central Cornwall, and he took them back to his lab in London, analysed them, and found that they were unusually rich in lithium. And he wrote his academic paper, which basically says, these could be a potential source of lithium, if only we had a source for it. I've got 3 minutes left, so I'm going to zoom on through this. But basically, we're looking for lithium contained within these geothermal waters. And actually, these waters are warm. So as well as just extracting the lithium, we also want to, if we can utilize that geothermal heat to either create geothermal power or just to help us, help us towards the processing of this lithium, then actually, if we can power our lithium extraction plants with the geothermal energy from the same waters, there's the opportunity to produce it in a net zero carbon way. We're also looking at the potential to produce lithium from the granite rock itself. And then there's a potential for other battery metals down here as well. It's not, mining didn't stop here because they ran out of ore, rather it stopped because the metal prices crashed and we moved elsewhere, and then, it's much, it's been cheaper to produce things elsewhere, but actually maybe we need to pay people a fair wage and rehabilitate the environment properly. So that's what we're looking at. We have a hard rock project that we're currently drilling. We're looking to use new technology that will effectively allow us to extract the lithium at a battery quality without having to roast it to really high temperatures. So we believe it's a much lower carbon route than other methods for extracting lithium from hard rock globally. And I mentioned that we're looking for lithium in geothermal waters as well. So if we can use that heat energy to actually allow us to power our lithium extraction processing plant, then there's the opportunity for it to be net zero carbon. And again, we think this is a more environmentally responsible way of producing lithium than, from conventional routes such as, well, there's no way that we could use evaporation to produce lithium from a brine deposit such as is done in South America because it rains far too much here. But, this is really an opportunity for it to be net zero carbon, which is pretty cool. And then just to end, because I'm aware that I've only got 1 minute left, I just wanted to talk about diversity. So we've talked about geodiversity and the importance of embracing and understanding, the geodiversity for sustainably extracting its georesources. But actually, there's a huge variety of careers in geoscience. We need to attract more students into the sector. Nowadays with digital mapping and digital, it's not just field work. We're not just all geologists traipsing around with rock hammers, though a lot of us do love that. But there are huge opportunities for people that might have traditionally not thought of going into the geo industry. Role models are so important, and we can't underestimate the importance of having someone visible to you. You can't be what you can't see. And that's where organizations such as Women in Mining, for example, and the young mining professionals that I'm involved in are so important. Having role models that are visible to you, so initiatives such as Women in Mining's 100 Inspirational Women in Mining, are fantastic because they really showcase the breadth of careers that are out there and the amazing variety of roles that you can have within the geoscience industry. We really need to encourage a new generation of students to study geoscience. If we don't have this keen generation coming up, if we don't have a diverse range of students coming into the industry, then we're not going to have that diversity of thought that we need to tackle such big global challenges as how on earth do we combat climate change. So I just want to end with that thought. Geoscience is such a fantastic industry to work in. Geodiversity just influences every aspect of our daily lives. And as geoscientists, I really believe that we are responsible. We are stewards of the earth. And so I think, there's a huge amount of good that we can do with our skill sets, and it's an exciting place to be at the moment. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much to Lucy for a wonderful, wonderful talk on a very important topic. The importance of the sustainable use of Earth's resources was highlighted in the resolution that was passed earlier today, and the Director General of UNESCO herself raised the issue of the need to sustainably use our geodiversity for a greener economy. So a very important and topical issue, and thank you for joining us today. Can I ask all our speakers to join us for the final panel? Apologies that we have slightly overrun. If there's any of the speakers or the audience need to go, apologies for overrunning, but as I say, we're having so much fun. And we will finish up by 1:15 we are in whatever time zone you're joining us from today. I'm going to start with a question to Sanaa, because we had, and there's maybe some of the other speakers might be interested in this as well, lots of discussion here about community engagement. Now, with you and your project in Egypt, Sanaa, do you have a problem with, or are there any challenges with exposing what is quite treasured paleontological heritage to members of the broader community? Does that raise challenges? Do you have to be careful about who you tell about some of these wonderful discoveries?
Yeah, we have really some serious concerns about doing this. So, and an example for the open air museums, all of the specimens that is exposed to people over there are we have replica for them. We have other specimens or other species for the same taxon that is exposed. So if it went damaged or something like that, we have a spare. We have other fossils for that. And for the fossils in the lab, we are very keen on showing and to show people the fossil that we have. Not everything for showing or for touching. So we are very aware of the people that are visiting us for enthusiasm, so they could actually feel very enthusiastic that they could touch something that could break down or fail. So we always keep an eye on that. We always have someone accompanying these tours in MUVP and to make these guidelines aware for them.
In some communities, she highlighted the Isle of Arran. The general understanding of geodiversity is very low when it is one of the premier geodiversity destinations in the world. And so perhaps is that something you've come across, and how do we counteract that? Because this will be a problem that could occur anywhere in the world.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, working on Sky, I think it's similar, although changing, because particularly actually in the Isle of Skye, because there is a local person who does an awful lot of outreach work and a lot of basically communicating the science and the sort of geoheritage of the area to his local community. His name is Dougie Ross. And I can't help but feel that local ambassadors like that are one of the real key parts to solving that puzzle. I don't really know why it happens. I mean, I grew up in a very rural part, one of the rural parts I was talking about in my talk of Scotland. And it was the same thing. When I grew up, I knew nothing about the geoheritage of my area, even though I grew up in some of the real key spots. So yeah, I can't help but feel that local ambassadors are part of the key, but also perhaps getting in there when people are young. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to particularly speak to kids, because I was hoping that it would have that effect that in the future, you know, they would then have that knowledge and be able to pass it on to their own communities.
And I've got a question for Stephen. A lot of people who perhaps haven't heard about Freshwater Watch or such a wide-scale citizen science project before. We've got a lot of people in the audience today who are representing geoparks, who might be interested in running a little Freshwater Watch themselves in their local area. Lots of people asking, how do we get involved with a project like this? Where do we find out more? Where should they go to get involved in the Freshwater Blitz?
Well, to get involved in this year's Freshwater Blitz might be a little difficult, but next year's Freshwater Blitz, or the Freshwater Watch program in general, wherever you are in the world, if you go on Google and you write Freshwater Watch, the site will come up. Or if you just look for your local Earthwatch office. So the Earthwatch has offices in North America, in the US, in India and Japan, and in Europe the office is in Oxford, although there's Earthwatch colleagues all over Europe. So if anyone who's interested should just contact the local Earthwatch office, or they can contact me, and I will be very happy to direct them to how to join and what would be required. And it's, you know, it would be great to have more projects set up, and this interaction between communities and scientists and policymakers is the key to geodiversity.
Online, get in touch with Stephen and go and test the water in your local water courses. I wanted to go to Lucy. A lot of praise in the chat for your talk. Thank you for joining us. People particularly also highlighting the importance of what you raised at the end there about the diversity of all the people within the geosciences, and that's something we all must take a responsibility for. But a very particular question from Paolo, which I thought was really important. Is it realistic that we can meet the demand for lithium in the time frame that the economy is trying to consume it?
That's a really good question, and you know, I'm not sure is the complete answer. Potentially not in the really near future anyway. So there are estimates that you know, the lithium market might actually go into deficit over the next couple of years, because the mining industry is so cyclical. It's very boom and bust, which is another thing it needs to work on for sustainability. And in the past few years, mining, you know, the prices for lithium have actually remained fairly low, despite this, you know, impending demand on the horizon that everybody's been talking about. The actual prices that people have been able to sell lithium at has been fairly low, and so that means the money that's been available for exploring for lithium has also been relatively low. And so there's this lag time between actually the supply and the demand. And so I imagine that in the next couple of years, as projects are coming on stream, but demand's going up faster than those projects are coming on stream, the market moves into a bit of a deficit, then the prices will go up, there's more money for exploration, and then they'll kind of catch up. So it's a big job to do, but that's why it's so important to make sure the Mining World Heritage Site, it's a UNESCO site because of its mining heritage, and very much, I think they've recently redone their management plan and would support the resumption of, you know, sustainable, responsible mineral extraction in the region. And so that's another reason that it is really key to be doing this properly this time around.
I'm conscious of all the time of the speakers that we've taken up, so I'll put one final question to Marco, a question of my own. What could we do, and maybe this is based on a false perception of my own, but do comment what you think. For me, I think, as someone who's trained in what we might call hard rock geology, things like this, sometimes I feel that geomorphology, which is an equal and important part of geodiversity, is given a lesser importance, and quite incorrectly. And what can we do as the wider community involved in geodiversity to ensure that geomorphology plays its full role and is properly highlighted? And I'm thinking about everything from academia to geoparks, and where we're highlighting the wonderful diversity of geodiversity, that geomorphology is included within that.
As you have seen by my presentation, I showed picture of the beauty of nature that come from geomorphology. So geomorphology as a part of the landscape can attract people, but it's also a way for making understanding the dynamic processes that are acting on surface that are related to deep processes too. But I mean, geomorphology is also as an hazard in sometimes, and so this is important. Geodiversity through landforms can give the touch with the human activity and maybe to model future behaviors.
Thank you so much to Marco. Thank you to all our speakers, both in this session and the previous one. And thank you to all of you who've joined us at home for a very special afternoon celebrating the wonderful news from this morning. We will keep you in contact about what is happening with International Geodiversity Day as it continues to go through the process, its final hurdles. We'll also keep you updated on the recordings of the talks for those that we are able to make public. I know that was a question in the chat, and please do follow along on social media, which is a great way to follow what is happening. You might be able to see some of the wonderful illustrations that our usual illustrator, Rachel Simpson, has been drawing along of our lovely talks and speakers. So thank you for following along wherever you have been, the many hundreds of you around the world. I'm really grateful to the support of both my colleagues, the professors that have been driving forward IGD, and our sponsors who have funded this event, and also IAG and IAPG, who have really pushed this event forward. So thank you once more, everyone. Have a lovely weekend wherever you are in the world.